You see those air purifiers everywhere, right? They're all boasting these crazy high filtration rates, 99.98%, 99.99%. You think, great clean air.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a sense of security, those numbers.
But, what really jumped out at me from the material we've been digging into is that those impressive numbers often have a catch. A big one, actually.
Okay.
It turns out they're mostly focused on the bigger particles, like 80 to 100 nanometers and up.
And while, sure, getting rid of those larger pollutants is good.
Right, definitely.
The sources we looked at really highlight that they aren't the main worry when you're talking about serious long-term health effects from air quality.
Exactly, because the real problem, it seems, is those much, much tinier particles down in the 5 to 30 nanometer range.
Okay.
And the sources point out these are the ones that can really get deep into your lungs, like right down to the alveoli.
Wow.
And there's even research suggesting they can cross the blood-brain barrier, which is kind of scary.
That is concerning.
And it looks like those mainstream air purifiers, they aren't really doing much to stop those particles.
So I guess the core question becomes, why do these traditional methods fall short with these ultrafine particles? And, what else might be out there? What might offer a more complete solution for, well, truly clean air and maybe better long-term health based on the info we've got?
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. Why aren't the standard purifiers quite cutting it? The sources explain that most of them rely on physical filters, things like HEPA filters, ULPA filters.
Familiar stuff, yeah.
And yeah, they're pretty good at trapping the larger particles, say 100 nanometers and bigger.
But their performance takes a significant dip when you get to those smaller sizes.
Yeah.
The material we looked at shows a really sharp drop in efficiency for anything below about 80 nanometers.
Right. And it's not just about the size either. The sources also mention that these conventional filters kind of struggle with other airborne things.
Like what?
Like neutral gel particles or acidic or basic toxic gases, even oil-based aerosols, things you wouldn't normally think about.
All things that can still cause respiratory issues or other health problems.
Definitely. And beyond just what they can filter initially, there's also the issue of the filters themselves just wearing out over time.
Degrading, yeah.
Yeah.
As they fill up with pollutants, they obviously get less effective.
Makes sense.
And the material even raises the possibility of, secondary pollution if they aren't changed out properly, meticulously maintained.
Which stands to reason they can only hold so much junk. But what I found really interesting is this sort of fundamental physical problem the sources highlight.
What's that?
This trade-off between how fine the filter mesh is and how easily air can actually flow through it.
Ah, right, the airflow problem.
Precisely. If you make the mesh super fine to try and catch those tiny, tiny particles, you basically choke off the airflow. You drastically restrict it. And if the air can't circulate properly through the purifier, the whole system just becomes much less useful, doesn't it?
Yeah, it cripples the whole purification process.
It really does. So, okay, if I'm understanding this correctly, this built-in design issue means that the air purifiers most of us are using probably aren't giving much protection against those really tiny, the 5 to 30 nanometer ultrafine particles. The ones the sources keep emphasizing pose such a big risk to our health. It's almost unsettling, thinking we might be focusing on the less harmful stuff.
That's the rather concerning picture painted by this material, yeah.
Yeah.
Which naturally makes you wonder if there are other technologies out there, maybe things that can get around these limitations.
Which conveniently brings us to what our sources present as a different way of doing things. The Air 6-free maze purifier, invented by a Fuchi Wu, and it's specifically described as being designed to hit that toxic particle blind zone that the regular purifiers seem to miss.
Interesting. And what's fascinating here is the material gives us a direct comparison, between the conventional filters and this maze purifier.
Yeah, side by side, it really helps clarify the differences. Let's look at some of these points. So first, how they actually filter the air. Traditional ones use static physical blocking, basically, like a sieve, right?
Trackage particles, yeah.
Whereas the maze purifier is described using labyrinth airflow, electrostatic absorption, and something called dynamic capture. That just sounds way more active.
It certainly sounds different, yeah.
Yeah.
A multi-pronged approach. And when we look at effectiveness for those crucial particles, the ones smaller than 50 nanometers, the sources draw a really stark contrast. They say almost none for conventional filters versus highly efficient absorption and neutralization for the maze purifier. That's a massive difference in claimed performance.
Huge difference, definitely. And it goes further how they handle things like gel toxins. Traditional filters apparently have no capability, just flat out.
Okay.
While the maze purifier is specifically designed to absorb and destroy them, I mean, that's a pretty bold claim.
It is, and the comparison also touches on durability and maintenance. We all know traditional filters degrade, you got to replace them.
Right, the ongoing cost.
Yeah. But the maze purifier is described differently. Modular design, self-adjusting airflow, and structure. Sounds like it's built for a longer lifespan, maybe less fuss.
Suggests a different approach to keeping it running, yeah. And finally, maybe the biggest difference is their core focus, their philosophy.
Oh, so.
Conventional purifiers seem to prioritize, comfort and those PM2.5 readings, which are important, obviously.
Sure.
But the maze purifier's core idea is framed as toxin-free air plus aging delay plus true health focus. That really shifts the goalpost, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It moves beyond just particle counts to this broader idea of air quality impacting, well, long-term health, maybe even the aging process itself, according to the source.
Okay, so this maze purifier, it definitely sounds like it's tackling the problem from a completely different angle. Let's try and dig into how this breakthrough technology, as they call it, is actually supposed to work.
All right.
The source mentions this Air 6-free concept first. What's that about?
Right, the Air 6-free idea is basically the end goal. It stands for achieving air that is dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and heavy metal-free.
Okay, so pretty much free of everything bad.
That's the ambition, yeah, to eliminate a really wide spectrum of airborne pollutants.
And then the source details this 5-step process, the revolutionary maze air purification process. Let's break it down. Step 1 sounds familiar. HEPA and activated carbon pre-filtration.
It does start with some conventional elements, yeah. This first stage is described as removing the bigger stuff, PM2.5, dust, pollen, even microplastics.
Okay.
And the activated carbon is in there to absorb VOCs. Those chemicals from paints, furniture cleaners, plus odors, industrial gases. So it tackles the common, larger pollutants first.
Got it. Standard opening move. Step 2 gets a bit more interesting. Negative ion charging plus pathogen neutralization. What's going on there?
So according to the material, there's a specific controlled chamber inside. And in there, viruses, bacteria, and also those nanoparticles get charged with negative ions.
Okay. Charging them up.
Exactly. And the key claim here is that this process neutralizes these pathogens without just releasing free ions out into the room, which can sometimes be a concern with other ionizer tech.
Ah, okay. So it keeps the ions contained while they do their work. Then step 3, electrostatic capture.
Right. So now these charged particles from step 2 are drawn towards electrostatic plates. And importantly, the claim is they get trapped permanently.
Permanently.
That's the word they use, preventing them from just getting knocked loose and floating back into the air. This seems aimed at addressing a potential weakness in some electrostatic systems where particles might not be held securely.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, step 4, this sounds like the core of it. The maze effect forced labyrinth filtration.
This sounds like the real innovation. Yeah. It's described as forcing the air through a deliberately complex, multi-angled maze structure.
Like a labyrinth, okay.
Exactly. And the crucial idea is that nanoparticles, because they're so incredibly light, they have almost no inertia, they apparently can't follow the airflow around these sharp curves easily.
Oh, interesting. Like they keep going straight when the air turns.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine trying to throw, fine powder around a sharp corner onto a sticky wall. It just goes straight and hits the wall before the corner, right?
Yeah, I can picture that.
Similarly, these nanoparticles are supposed to break away from the main airflow path and collide with positively charged walls within the maze. They call this electrostatic impaction.
Electrostatic impaction.
Okay. And the source really emphasizes that every single curve in this maze acts as another trap.
So it's not just a passive filter, it's actively using the physics of how these tiny particles move or don't move around corners combined with electric charges to trap them inside this maze.
That's the fundamental concept presented. It's positioned as a more dynamic way, and supposedly a more effective way, to grab these ultrafine particles that regular filters struggle with because of that basic airflow versus mesh size problem we talked about.
Right, the trade-off.
Something engineers have wrestled with for ages, yeah.
Okay. And then finally, step 5 is final purification and ultra-clean air release.
And the source claims that only ultra-purified air makes it out. And it comes with some pretty significant claimed benefits attached.
Like what?
Boosting brain function, reducing fatigue, enhancing organ health. Pretty big claims.
Those are substantial. And the source makes a point of distinguishing this, right? Calling it biological protection engineering, not just filtration.
Exactly, framing it as a fundamentally different approach to air purification. And it's worth noting again, they mentioned a U.S. patent for this technology, US 826A058 or B2. Suggests it's documented at least.
Okay, so let's bring this back around to you, the listener. What the sources we've explored really seem to drive home is that point about the 99.99% filtration rates we see advertised. They often focus on the pollution you can almost see, the bigger particles floating around, dust and stuff.
And the crucial insight here, the thing to really take away, is that it might be the invisible pollution, those tiny 3 to 30 nanometer toxic particles that the material suggests are actually the major players when it comes to things like the aging process and long-term burden on our vital organs.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradigm shift in thinking about air quality.
And while this source material highlights the potential benefits of this maze purifier.
Right. The Air 6-free maze purifier is presented as offering protection against those specific contaminants, the really concerning ones, at what they call both a technological and a biological level.
And again, it's important to remember, these are the claims being made based on the scientific validation and the patent mentioned in the source material we reviewed.
Absolutely. So, okay, to wrap this up then. The key takeaway from digging into these materials is really about understanding the maybe inherent limitations of traditional air filters, especially when you get down to those ultrafine, deeply penetrating particles.
Right. And it introduces this idea of alternative technologies like this Air 6-free maze purifier concept that are specifically designed to tackle that toxic particle blind zone.
It definitely raises a big question for you listening. When you think about clean air, what does that truly mean anymore?
Yeah. Are the solutions most of us rely on actually dealing with the whole picture, the full spectrum of airborne toxins, especially the stuff happening at the nanoscale?
It's certainly something to chew on, to think critically about the air you breathe every day and maybe look a little closer at the information you see about air purification from now on.